Welcome to the podcast Running Toward. This podcast tells stories of ordinary people who couldn't look away once they saw the hidden crisis in foster care and the families impacted. Our guests share heartbreak that led them to take reluctant and unexpected small, faithful steps toward the most vulnerable in their communities. Not because they had a plan, and not because they felt ready, but because they couldn't unsee their pain. You'll hear how people living normal lives discover that getting closer changed them. Their comfort mattered less, their grip on uncertainty faded, and their faith got feet in quiet, everyday ways. Ending the crisis for one or for all isn't a quick fix. It's a long, slow, often messy journey alongside one of the most overlooked and misunderstood groups in our community. Running Toward gives you a front row seat to the hidden crisis in foster care and the families impacted, and to the ordinary people who choose not to look away. Welcome back to the Running Toward podcast. Today, I'm super excited to have my friend Brenda in studio today, and we get to hear, again, another just a cool angle on the foster care lane and journey that she was on. You know, most people step into foster care, and they just kind of carry this quiet story. I know we've heard it in other podcasts of like almost feeling like the hero, like the one who's got it all together, who's stepping in to save, quote unquote, save these kids from the situations that they're in. But in all of these stories, there comes this moment where you see the reality of the situation. And Brenda has that same part in her story of a time when she was at a shelter and interacted with some moms and saw just a different side to the whole story. No one handed her a cape, and no one saw her in that light, and she realized something completely different than kind of what she came into the story with. So this is not a story about saving families. Really, none of these are. And that's one of the things that we hope to debunk here on the Running Toward podcast is that this is just about a bunch of broken people coming together and wrapping around kids and families and working towards healing and hope. So Brenda, thanks for coming.
Yes.
Thanks for being here on your spring break. We appreciate it. Let's start with, what does a typical Monday look like in your house? Spouse, kids?
Yeah, so my husband and I have been married 23 years. We just had an anniversary yesterday.
Congratulations.
We have 3 kids. My son is going to college out of state, so I just got to visit him. I have twin girls who are in high school, and so a typical day is never typical. It just depends on what is going on that day. You might have a, drum lesson, or we might have something else going on. So it just kind of depends on the day. But we both work full time. So kids going to school, going to work, making dinner, just trying to figure out dinner.
What do you guys do for fun?
We like watching movies. My husband and I went to Chicken and Pickle yesterday just by ourselves,
There you go.
So that was kind of fun. And the kids were okay with that.
That's great. That's cool. Before foster care even had like a label, because you grew up with foster care, quote unquote, in part of your story, but it wasn't really labeled like that.
No.
So what was the system, the process, all of that like before you actually even had a label for it for you?
That in itself is a very different experience, I think, from a lot of people. I was born and raised in El Salvador, so, small country in Central America, developing country. I was raised by a single mom, so she was trying to make things work. And so we, we had a house with running water and electricity, and that was good. And so, but we grew up in church, so we would go to church, and the church had a ministry to where every Sunday, like after church, we would go to an orphanage. And so a Sunday would look like we go to church in the morning, then we go home, we have lunch, and then we're going to the orphanage. And, the church will bring snacks, and they would have sort of like a Sunday school, type of thing. And so my mom would take me, and so I would work, I would help, and I walked the hallways, in the orphanages. I remember seeing the babies in the cribs and the smell, of walking, and so so that was just, we would do that all the time. And in fact, when there was a boy that was in that orphanage, there was a lot of stuff that happened, and they had to close down the orphanage, and they were trying to find homes for these kids. And this little boy, they were asking him, like, do you know anybody? Do you have anybody? I mean, he was already maybe like 11 or 12 or something. Yeah. And he said, I only know the lady from church that comes every Sunday.
Oh,
and
wow.
that's like Miss So-and-so is the only person that I know. And so they called my mom, and so we like adopted him, but I don't know that he was adopted. I don't know there was any type of like paperwork
no judges, no paperwork,
or anything. And well, I do think there was a judge, but basically she said, can you just like take him? Like he doesn't have anybody. Yeah. So it was, traumatic, for him, what he had gone through.
Sure.
But we never called it, he's your foster brother or, anything like that. He came to live with us. People were telling my mom, you're crazy for doing this, know. I was like 11 at a time, so this older boy is coming. Right. So, so that was that. My grandparents, they also, I remember they would help teen girls that had babies. Like they would bring them into their homes. And I kind of remember, just a couple girls and their babies. So not labeled foster care or, even adoption, even though now I had an older brother, So that's kind of how it was, like growing up.
So really like almost a legacy of this, like seeing the vulnerable and seeing those that are in need and like being like, okay, well, why not? Why not us? Yeah, I'm a single mom in a developing country, and I'm like, there's an 11-year-old boy that needs a home, so we'll figure it out.
I was an only child for like 11 years, and then right at that time, my mom was also expecting my younger brother. So, I was a single child, and then I had an older brother and a younger brother, and this is my mom. That was the situation she was in. She was secretary, not making a lot of money, trying to get through school, so, but she took him in.
That's great. So in your own kind of personal story, you came into foster care with what motivation? What was your motivation to step into this space? What kind of led you here?
So because of all that, like knowing that there were children that didn't have homes was not like, oh my gosh, I knew that. I knew that from the beginning. Right. Grew up with that. Would see kids on the street, and so it was not like, oh my gosh, so I kind of knew that, but it wasn't something that I was like, oh, I hope I will adopt one day. Right. My husband and I, when we started talking about, getting married, and we talked about, kids and stuff, I think we said something like, hey, if we don't have kids, would you adopt? Yeah, I would too. Okay, check that off. Right. And interestingly enough, for him, even before we met, he had been a missionary in El Salvador, and he had worked in a children's home. It was an orphanage run by a ministry, so it was a little bit better than the government orphanage. But so he also had that, he understood like what that was. Yeah. So once, we were like ready to start a family, we dealt with infertility issues, and we did treatments and things, and I was able to get pregnant with my oldest, my biological son, and that was great. But then after that, we wanted to have more kids, and we couldn't. And for us, it was like, we're not going to spend like any more time and money and energy and emotions, and all this. We know there are tons of kids that don't have homes, so it was kind of like, so we're going to do that, and so we, but I think I was still kind of thinking it's going to be like maybe somebody giving up their child, and then I would go, and take that child or something.
More of like a straight adoption situation.
And so, but when we started discussing that, I talked with one of my aunts, and at that time, she had taken in 3 kids. Something had happened. And so she was going through becoming certified to be a foster home. I mean, the kids were placed there, but they were like, you have to become a foster home. Right. So she was like, hey, you know that you can do this. Like, you don't have to go back to El Salvador, to go adopt a couple kids or anything like that, She was like, just see what you do in the state of Texas. Right. So we were like, okay, let's go to CPS. We found a meeting, and we learned about foster care just from CPS. We didn't hear it from, our church. We didn't hear it from me going to school or my husband, we didn't hear it from anybody. And at that time, I'm talking about almost 15 years ago, it was just the two of us, we didn't know anybody else that was doing this. Yeah. And so we found a meeting and we went, very dry.
Yeah.
So we were like, okay, so then we started learning, and then we found that there was an option to be a foster to adopt home. Right. So that's kind of how we started, I guess, moving in the process. Right. And then that's kind of how we came into okay, we're going to become a certified home.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Must be so interesting for you, background coming from you just see kids in need and you take them in. So no, now the government is going to be all in your business.
Yes.
So many rules,
yes.
So much training, yes. So much paperwork.
Yes.
Yeah.
And honestly, also the fact that we had also the knowledge was these kids don't have parents. With my brother, his mother had been killed during the war, and his siblings had fled and, that kind of thing. So, it wasn't these kids have parents.
Yeah,
when we were talking about being foster parents, they were well, they do have parents. Right. It's not they,
Yeah.
So
they're not orphans in the sense that they don't have living relatives.
Right.
Which they're functional, we like to say, they're functional orphans because the state of Texas has said you do have living parents, but they're not legally allowed to take care of you right now. Right. So there is a system for that, and it's foster care.
So it was definitely another layer. And yes, a lot of rules and things that my mom didn't have to go through.
No, she did not. But also you got some, at least in the state of Texas, you get some financial help to help. And I'm sure your mom got none of that when she signed up to take your brother.
Nope.
So before you're going through this training and you have your experience in El Salvador growing up, what is your view of biological family? Are you even thinking about them? Is that something that you and your husband talked about?
Not thinking about it at all.
Yeah.
We're just thinking we want to be parents.
Yeah. Singularly focused on
Yes, we are just thinking we want to adopt, and this is how we're going to grow our family.
Right.
It's the parents, the kids come from somewhere, but we're not thinking about it. Yeah. We really are not.
And in the classes, I'm sure they told you, foster care is supposed to be temporary. There's, the goal is reunification. But even in that, you're now we're going to keep them forever.
Right. Yeah. And we had, as you go through the process, then you start, we even got to the point when we understood that being a foster to adopt home meant that the kids might be with us and then we might have to, give them up and, they would go back to their family. So we understood that, okay, now maybe that's when we started thinking about it a little bit more.
Yeah.
When we don't get to keep them because they go back to their families, then I think maybe that's when we started kind of thinking about that a little bit more. And that was a process, kind of getting to that place of saying, I'm going to be okay with, letting go of these kids. So it just, but not thinking about the biological families.
Yeah, that side of the house.
Yeah. No.
So early on, did you have any fears going into fostering in the more formal sense that it is in the state of Texas? Was there things that kind of dug up in you of fears of, what are we taking on? What we don't have any control over whether they stay or they leave. Did you experience that? Take us back to that. What were those fears?
I laugh about it now, now that it's 15 years later.
Right.
But when we started the training, they're talking about all the requirements and things. But at one point, the lady that was training us, which you've talked about, Linda.
Which we share.
Yeah, yes. Linda Herdebeest. She was talking about how, you're going to take care of them, you're going to love them, this and that. And she said, but it's not their job to love you. And I was like, what? Wait. After you do all these things for them. I had seen my mom, what she had done, for my brother. And I see my aunt and everything she's doing, And I was like, what do you mean they're not supposed to love you, you know? But I was like, okay, you know, kind of got through that. And then she's talking about, and you know, you might have some kids that might like chase you around with like a pair of scissors or something, you know? And I don't know why that stuck with my mind, like that example. And I was like, what? You know, chase me around with a pair of scissors. And then she said something about, you know, some kids might like intentionally like start a fire, you know? And I was like, what? And I was like, okay, I have a 3-year-old at home. Like at that time I had a little one. And so my fears were around safety at that time.
Yeah.
You know, like, what do you mean somebody's going to be chasing around, you know, somebody with a pair of scissors? You know, like I didn't know back then, you know, exactly what it was. But I remember, you know, kind of asking some of those questions. And one of the things that I remember Linda, you know, saying was like, well, what would you do if your 3-year-old was the one running around with scissors? Yeah. You know, and I was like, well, I would tell him, stop, you know, like that's not safe, you know, that's blah, blah, blah. And so she was like,
that's what you do.
Same kind of thing, you know. And so I was like, oh, okay. Okay, some things, I guess, you know, it's kind of common sense, right?
That was the gift of Linda. I think she had the way of like just laying it out there, and then when you like recoiled, then she just like talked you through it, and you're like, oh, okay, I can do that. Yeah, of course.
The funny thing about that is that I was so scared about, you know, some kids starting a fire. I put that on our application, like, please, no fire starters. And the thing about it is that unintentionally, we've had like almost 3 times that somebody started like a fire in my house. It just brains, and you know, like, no, this spoon does not go in the microwave, you know, like, don't. So I just think that's a, you know, God's sense of humor. Like,
seriously.
Oh, you didn't want a fire starter?
Yeah. And also it could be your biological kids too. So,
oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's so funny. So you mentioned a moment, this is kind of flash forward. So you start fostering, well, a little bit, kind of take us through what was the first placement? What was that like for you? What did you kind of wrestle with in that beginning of just, you're like, oh, we got kids in our house?
Yeah. So the very first placement that we were going to have, so we were ready. And so they said, okay, we have this little boy, and, gave us information. And so we're like, okay, he's coming. We were so excited. And we had the case manager at our house, like we were waiting with all the paperwork on the table. And this little boy had been in foster care, but I think his case was going to move to adoption or something. And they had asked the foster family, would you adopt? And they said, no, we're not going to adopt, And so that's why they were going to move him.
Right.
Well, the story is when CPS was on their way to go get him, the family said, we can't let him go. We changed our minds. Yeah. We're going to keep him. And obviously, since he had been placed there, so they're like, so they called us and they're like, not happening. And so we're like,
the joys of foster care.
Exactly.
Hurry up and get ready, and then
yes, and then put all the papers away, and So then we got the call with my girls, and so they called like on a Friday, and they said, hey, we have twin girls who are in the hospital. They're 2 weeks old. They need to go home on Monday. So would you take them? And at that point, I was the one on the phone, and we had been told, when we call you, you kind of have to already know because
yes or no.
It's not like, I'm going to go talk to my husband and see if
we'll get back to you in 2 days.
Yeah. So I was like, yes. So I called him and I said, guess what?
Hey, babe.
We're having twins. So we went we met them at the hospital, and, tiny babies. And so they said they're African-American babies, and we looked at them, and I'm like, they don't look African-American. They hadn't developed all their features and stuff. And so that was kind of funny. But they came home on Monday, and, they brought them in these carriers. They were 4 pounds each and tiny. And they said you have to feed them every 2 hours, day and night. And so we just kind of we're like, okay, you know, we're doing this. I was at home at that time. I was staying at home at that time. So thankfully, you know, I had the time to not sleep.
I was about to say, there was no sleep going on in that house for quite a while, I'm sure. So what was the beginning of that? Were you having to do visits? Were you getting to meet bio family?
So so mom still had visits. And so I remember asking, you know, the case manager, like, you know, do we get to meet the family or not? And I think she probably said something like, it's up to you.
Yeah.
You know, not very helpful, I feel like, you know.
They've gotten better. I mean, you and I started fostering a long time ago, but I think they have gotten better. But yeah, back in our day, they were like, almost like, yeah, you should probably just stay apart, which is actually not helpful for either side of the house. Right. But they definitely didn't encourage it.
Yeah. So our first visit, and again, I feel like, you know, my husband and I were kind of doing this like on our own, but I know really the Lord was, you know, I know the Holy Spirit was just kind of prompting us to do certain things. And so like this was one of them, you know, we're going to meet her. Right. I brought pictures of the girls, you know, to hand over to mom. And so that was really special. You know, she was... she asked if we would be willing to adopt them, like right then and there. She asked if we would like take them to church. Like she knew that there was something about, you know, going to church. And so we're like, well, we'll see what happens. Right. And so, but yeah, so I was taking them to their visits, and sometimes it was in a CPS office, or, you know, sometimes I had to meet somewhere else. And it was always like, okay, I had to take my little one and the twins, and, you know, here I am driving, you know, traffic, and it's like the other side of town. And so, but I'm really glad that we did that. Yeah. Like it was, at least I have a little bit of something I can tell my girls, like we did this, and this is what happened, you know, when you had your visits. So,
So as you're getting into this case, then there's a moment with your daughters when you go and visit at a shelter. So is that later down the line a little bit, I guess, further into the case?
Mom had gone into the shelter as part of her plan, you know, the program that what she had to do. And so in our case, unfortunately, mom only had like 6 months to kind of get her life together.
Change everything.
Who can do that? Right. You know, who can do that? And so we had to go visit, you know, at this shelter. And but we had other visits. So, you know, it wasn't my first interaction with mom. We had other interactions. But we went, and I remember feeling like, okay, so who is going to be like watching the girls? Like I knew it was a supervised visit. There was going to be somebody there, and so there was somebody that was like, oh yeah, go ahead, you know, like come in. And so I felt like I was just dropping off the babies that I had been taking care of. You know,
2 hours.
Like yes. So that mom instinct was like,
that's not a normal thing.
I wouldn't, you know, just leave my babies with people that I did not know. And so, you know, mom was there, and, you know, she came, and of course, you know, twin babies, and, you know, they were so cute. So they always kind of attracted a lot of attention. But there was this moment when, like, all the other women in the shelter, probably women that were in the same situation, you know, in the same boat, they all kind of came to look at the babies. And it was like, they literally like formed a circle, and I was not part of the circle. Yeah. You know, it was like, okay. You know, like, oh, and somebody said, I remember this. Somebody said, oh, yeah, they know who their mama is. Like the babies know. Look at that. They know who their mama is. You know, like you're not the mom. This is the mom. You know, it just felt like that. And so I just remember thinking like, okay. And that's what I'm saying. Like nobody said, oh, thank you so much for what you're doing. Or like, that's awesome, you know, that you're doing this. And it was not like that at all. Yeah. You know, and like I couldn't even like tell the babies, okay, bye, I'll be back in an hour or whatever. You know, it was like, we're taking them. You can go. And so I just had that feeling of like, wow, I have no control over this. Like, there's nothing I can do,
No.
about this. Like, so, and it felt like that. Like, this is not about you at all. This is not about you. So,
yeah, those, I had similar experiences that I've talked about. I think I talked about when I did my podcast, but that moment of like, I think everybody so far has had a moment when they knew they weren't in control, but on some level, we're Western Americans now, and we can like control the things. But it seems like in foster care, there always comes to this moment when you're like, oh, I am not in control. This is not about me. I don't get to decide anything. I'm just, it really mirrors, like, for me, looking back, like, of Jesus, like, no, you're just stewarding. And even the kids that you gave birth to, you're not in control of them either.
Right.
And if you want to, run down pride, I'll humble you with with your kids.
Yes.
For sure.
And so kind of going back to that in the training, when I was told, well, it's not their job to love you.
Right.
That also went not just for the kids, but for the families.
Right.
Biological families. It's also not their job to love you.
Yeah.
And in a way, it almost felt like I was the bad guy, And I'm like, I'm not. I'm the one up, at 3 a.m, feeding these babies and doing this and that. And so, so it was very humbling. It really was. It was like, oh. Just don't.
Yep. No,
it was.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You said also in some of our talks before that you realized that you were called to be a mom and not a judge. And that moment of like, I know for me, and I know other people on the podcast have come in and like very much judgmental of like, I have my crap together and you don't, and I will, take care of your kids for you. And then you realize at some point that's not, God didn't ask you to do that. No.
I think if I had to pick a time when that happened, it was probably after that visit.
Yeah.
Because that's when it was like, I have no power over this, no control over this. And, I think that's when I felt like the only thing that I can do is to be a mom for these babies.
Yeah.
I'm here right now. This is what I'm doing. I'm going to feed them. I'm going to play with them. I'm going to, do all 3 of them,
Yeah.
And so it just felt like this is the only thing that I can do.
Right.
I can't, make the case go this way or make the case go that way or influence, this or that. I was like, this is the only thing that I can actually do is get up with these babies and feed them and love them and take care of them and, just all of them,
Yeah.
And that's why I was like, well, I can do that.
Yeah. That's
I can do that. And somebody else already has the job of being judge, and that's not me. That's not what I signed up for.
Right.
I don't want that job. Let somebody else do that. And just let it be the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
So
that case does end up in adoption, though.
Yes.
So tell me about the day after adoption. Gavel drops, documents signed.
Yes.
The judge will tell you they're as if you gave birth to, like you're supposed to treat them as if you gave birth to them. And it, on some level, can feel like a finish line. But actually, it was a starting line.
Yes,
because
for sure.
Nothing changes.
No.
I mean, short of their last name and that you don't have to fill out med logs and all those things that we had to do in foster care.
Yes.
Literally nothing changes. Their trauma doesn't go away.
No.
Their histories don't go away. All the things that, came, it's still there the day one after adoption. Take me back to that time.
It was a little... it's a little conflicted because at one point I wanted mom to do okay. I wanted her to be successful.
Right.
Sorry.
No, take your time.
Even if that meant we wouldn't keep the girls.
Right.
So we were ready, for that. Like we had just, because she really did try. She was trying. So I think it was just hard, when you don't have the support.
Right.
And now we're talking about twins. We're talking about 2 babies that she would have to, And so when it finally went to adoption, of course we were happy.
Sure.
But it also meant the other side.
Yeah.
It didn't go so well.
Right.
So that part was a little bit conflicting because, of course, we were happy. We were so excited because then that means, but that was a little tough. And then, like, the next day, like you said, I don't even remember exactly what the next day was like, but it's like the fact that life just goes on.
Right.
And it was more like the next day was more like the next couple years. I had to learn how to do their hair. That was something that I had to learn how to do.
Right.
And I had to just continue to, raise twins and, this and that. And I had to be open to people helping me with the things I didn't know.
Yeah.
I remember I was taking my kids for a walk in the neighborhood, and I had my double stroller, and here I am pushing my girls, and one of my neighbors is out for a walk, and she was like, "Oh, hi, how's it going? Your babies are so cute. Who helps you with their hair?" And it was an African American woman who later I found out had been adopted by parents of a different race, and so she remembered what it was for her mom.
Yeah, figuring it
to
all
figure
out.
out her hair. And so she just like jumped in, And you know what? I was like, hey, please. She came to my house, so the fact that you have people that are like, you know what? I know that she's going to need help with that. I don't need to be offended about that.
Right.
I'm like, come help me.
Please.
And we sat there and she told me, do this, use this product and do that. And, so those were all the things that kind of came, after adoption and just, life keeps going. Life just kept going, It wasn't like, oh, now things are easy now that we've adopted.
that is the thing that I think most people on the outside looking in that haven't been involved in foster care or adoption, they don't see the other side of the adoption day, that it is joyous and wonderful and all the things that it is. And then there's also the other side of like, for this to even exist, a relationship had to be broken, a what should have been had to not be for this to even be a possibility for an adoptive family to adopt because and that's the reality for us as adults, but then we also are walking alongside of our kids as they process that at 4 and 10 and 14, and they'll process it again at 24 and when they have kids and it doesn't end on adoption day.
And I couldn't explain it to my girls, obviously, when they were adopted. So the process was basically like a year, so they were in foster care for almost a year, and then the adoption went through. So there were some things that I couldn't say to them, but later on, they were able to understand, like, adoption is happy and sad.
Yeah.
And almost hearing that, I think to them was like, okay, like, I'm glad that you're saying that because there's a part of them that is a little sad, but they feel like I shouldn't be sad because I love my mom, you know? And so, so there was again, talking about like what happens after adoption, those conversations come up. There's more information that you share about what happened, in their case. There's more questions. And, I remember one of my girls, we were talking about it, and she said, Mom, I want to love my other mom. Like, she felt almost like, I don't know, like maybe she wasn't being loyal or something, like if she says, I want to love her.
And they don't want to even talk about it.
Right.
Because they don't want to hurt your feelings.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
And I said, baby, your heart is big enough. We both fit in there.
Yeah.
And so she was little and she was like, okay, and she just like went away, and of course I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Kids just have they're like, oh, okay, move on. Where all the adults are like,
yes. So there's a lot that comes after, that adoption day and all of the things that we still had to do.
It isn't, like you said, it's an ongoing conversation that changes over the years as they get older and figure out more and more things about their story. And it is a journey.
Yeah.
If you could go back to that finalizing adoption day, is there anything that you would have hoped for that went differently in that season?
Yes, I definitely would get that mom's number.
Yeah.
I would be like, give me your number.
Yeah.
Let's figure out a way to keep in touch. And
Yeah.
I understand the fear
Right.
of their situations when it may not be safe.
Sure.
That's what
Obviously.
people tell
Yeah.
you all the time. And I think we tend to hear that, like,
Right.
okay, it may not be safe, so we're going to go,
Right.
we're going to be cautious and we're not going to go there. But as I've talked to other families and when they've talked about the benefits of being in touch with the biological family, it seems to be like there's more benefit, to doing that than like it's not safe.
Right.
I think if I could, I would have just said, let's just keep in touch somehow. Let's just see how it goes.
Right.
If it's not safe, then obviously
Yeah.
we don't have to go there.
Right.
But how about grandma? Can we be in touch with grandma?
Right.
Or do you have somebody else,
Right.
that we can be in touch with?
Yeah.
So I think I would have liked to just push a little bit more for that, like reassure maybe mom that, hey, it's okay, like if we stay in touch somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's another one of the things that I think when you and I were going, I think they do a better job of it now, but when you and I were, it was very much this like separation,
Yeah.
and they were, I think most people were scared of what would happen for, some very valid reasons, but also some very invalid fears that were unsubstantiated.
Yeah.
And yeah, we had the same thing. We've had various relationships with bio family afterwards, and some of them are great, and some of them are like, this maybe in a different season. Maybe they need to get to a different season before that can happen.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah. So you've adopted 2. You close your house. You go back again. What do you do? What happens?
So, yeah, we did. We were like, okay, we're raising these twins
3
and we're
toddlers
doing
is a lot.
this. And then we started, honestly, so at that point, the church that we were at, again, nothing related to adoption, foster care, or anything. And we actually found a church that had a ministry, and we were like, oh, that's us.
People.
Like, And so we had been at our church for a very long time. So it was one of those, like, do we leave? Do we not leave? But we were like, maybe we should go check this out. And we felt like it was, there were people there, the connections there.
Right.
And so we actually started hearing about the crisis in foster care in the city.
You're like, yeah,
and we're
there.
like, oh yeah, no, we went through that, and it's like, oh wait, you actually adopted? And we're like, yeah, So they brought him in, and he came in as a basic kiddo, but it turned out that he wasn't basic. And so same thing, he had visits, and so we went through the honeymoon stage. He was doing fine, and then we started seeing all the behaviors, and we still had visits with mom. So we would go to the visits. I don't think that we were prepared for like what that did to my girls. It really triggered them, in different ways, because they would say, well, how come he gets to see his mom? And how come you take him, and like you're helping this mom, but you didn't help our mom. And it was like, well, no, you had visits, and, kind of trying to explain, right, the
'cause they were
different
too
situation.
little.
They were too little. They
didn't know.
don't remember. But having him at home, and he would just like get into things, and he would get into their stuff. And of course, that created problems. It really almost became like we had like 3 foster kids. He was aggressive, like he was really aggressive towards me. And so, things were just getting really crazy. My oldest, my son, he was like, I just want to be at school. Like, I don't even want to be home. Like, I just want to be gone, which I'm like, well, I don't want that either.
Right.
And so, but we had visits, with mom. And so same kind of thing. I was more determined to like, I'm going to say hi to this mom. We're going to talk to this mom. And she was also very like distant at first, you know, and we had to have a virtual visit, which
oh gosh,
was so crazy.
Yeah.
Just trying to get this 5-year-old to come
Sit
talk to your mom, you know.
Yeah.
He wouldn't, so I ended up just talking to her, you know. And in that virtual visit, she was like, so why did you decide to foster? Yeah. And so, you know, she was a young mom. And so I was kind of glad, you know, that she was. And so I said, you know, we just know that there are a lot of kids that are in foster care. And sometimes there are no homes where they can go. And they go to shelters or they go to an office.
Yeah.
And I said, I just figured I have a bed. Somebody can come sleep here, you know. Yeah. And I think just for her to understand, like, there was nothing else behind.
Yeah, like you weren't coming in to get her kid.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, I just have a bed, you know, and
just
an extra chair, you know.
Yeah.
And so I think that kind of put her at ease a little bit. So anytime we went and visited, I always, you know, tried to talk to her. Yeah. And so we just kind of started having this ability, you know, to just have conversations. And again, with that mindset of, I'm not judging. Yeah. I'm not, I don't know what you've been through, you know?
Yeah.
You know, like with my girls, I knew that mom had been in the system herself, you know? And so I'm like trying to also connect with this mom. And so, and she was also trying really hard to do the things that she needed to do, you know, to get her kids back. I'm going to talk to this mom, you know, like we're going to talk.
All the like fear and all that. Like, now I know what I'm doing. I know what I can do.
And I would tell her, you know, like he does this at school and, you know, he doesn't want to put his shoes on. And so sometimes, you know, my husband has to walk him into school and he walks in his socks because he doesn't want to put his shoes on. So she would be like, oh, you need to put your shoes on and, you know, and this and that. And so, so it was... like I said, it was a lot because he wasn't basic. The principal talked to us and, you know, she said he is the neediest child in the entire school. You know, like because he would like run out of the classroom. He would, you know, do all these things. But they knew we were trying, you know, and this and that. So that lasted, I think he was with us, you know, 6 months. I think it was just like the spring you know, semester that he was in school with us. And so mom was able to do what she needed to do and she got her kids back. Yeah. And so we decided you know, again, it was kind of tricky. At that point, he was starting to try some medication, you know, to help with some things. And so all of that, it was so much easier to have that communication with mom.
To set her up for success, too.
Right. You know, to be like, hey, you know, and obviously we still had to get her permission, you know, for a lot of things. But just having that input, giving her that place of you're the mom, you know, I think. And
you're a part of this child. Like you're a part of raising this child. Like you're a part of the team.
Right.
Instead of this like.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. It's like, no, I'm just here, you know, I'm just kind of the person, like my job is to keep him safe. I would tell him that all the time. What's my job? You know, my job's to keep you safe. So climbing up the stairs like that, you know, it's not safe.
Right.
So, so I would say that to her too, you know, like that's all I'm trying to do, just to keep him safe, you know, while he's at home with us. So, once he went back, we just kind of stayed in touch, you know, and I can't really remember exactly how we just said, well, at that point, so we decided we were not going to open our home anymore. So it was just, you know, we kind of had to reset, you know, with, and I know, you know, a lot of people kind of go through that. Yeah. And so we decided, but we were able to keep in touch with the mom. And so we kind of started doing like some play dates, you know, so he would still come and see us. He was like missing us, you know, and missing my girls because they did, you know, play together and this and that. And so just a little bit at a time like that, you know, we kind of kept in touch and kept going back and forth. And then eventually we got invited to a birthday party. And I was like, well, you know, if he wants to come over, he can. And I know that some people might be like, what? You know, like that usually doesn't happen. Like when you're done with a foster family, you're done, you know, and there's no protection from the state, you know, like what if something happens, you know, to this kid while he's in your home, you know, and da-da-da-da. But I guess that for us, it was an arrangement that we had, like Mom and I were, you know, just talking, and she trusted me.
And that's actually what she needed, was healthy community and relationships that stay instead of just like.
So when she had, you know, then other kids came along and this and that, but we always kind of had that connection. And I remember talking to a coach that was helping us with like behavior things. Like, so when we had everybody, we started attending these like coaching classes. And this lady said, I was explaining the situation to her, and she said, you know, the fact that she's okay with you still kind of being in there is a good sign, because then she's okay with you coming to see how things are in the house.
Right.
You know, she's not like hiding anything.
Right.
You know, it's like just having that is helpful, you know. And so we were like, okay, so we're just going to, as much as Mom would allow it, you know, we never pushed. And honestly, she never did either. So it always felt very like she was respecting our boundaries. You know, we were respecting hers, you know. So we have been able to stay in touch with that family. And she has called me when she has an art, for example, you know, and she's like, you know, I have, and so what, you know, this is what I'm concerned about. And I've been like, okay, what is it that you're wanting to say, you know, so we can think about that together. So I've taken time off, like during work, you know, to be in an art, you know, for over an hour, you know, like listening to all the things.
That's what I always tell people, like, the reason that we ended up with the kids that we did is because that biological family had nobody in their circle. If I went off the rails, there's lines of people that would take my kids. But that mom had no one.
Absolutely.
Because whatever life had dealt her, she had no one. And so then you get someone enters your life because now they're fostering your kids, but the state doesn't encourage you to be in a relationship with them. And then after the case is over, they're like, you're all done.
Right.
And actually, that's exactly what if that mom is going to be successful, it can be a very key relationship to making that happen.
Because she didn't have that. You know, I feel like the reason why we were kind of there is because she didn't have that to begin with. Yeah. And when we got this little boy, I mean, it was the perfect example of, like, you're talking about, like, the circle. We got this little boy at 3 a.m. All my kids wake up and there's a little boy sleeping, you know, and they're like staring at him. Like, and I called my friend and I said, hey, we got a placement. Within like 3 hours, I had somebody that brought me clothes and toys and shoes and snacks, and somebody else brought a meal. You know, I had a friend that brought me flowers because she was like, I didn't know what else to bring you. Do you think that this mom ever got flowers from anybody?
No.
You know, and I think that's when I'm like, you don't have that. Right. You don't have that, you know? And so I'm like, but you need to be okay with, like, coming out of your circle and go step in that circle that may not be as familiar to you, you know? Yeah. And you can't go over there and be like, well, I wouldn't handle laundry like this. You know, I wouldn't do this like that, you know? Yeah. Immediately you'll be like, then you go back to where you came from, you know? Exactly. So, so I think that is absolutely true, like that support, you know, just having that. And so being able to, you know, get on the phone when she's like, oh my gosh, you know, this just happened and, you know, and to be able to say, okay, hold on 1 second, tell me what's going on, you know, So that is what we have been able to keep doing, you know, with this mom. Again, that brought some things on my girls for sure, because they didn't have that. Right. And they wish that we would have done that. Yeah. And we didn't, you know? And so, you know, you kind of have those regrets. You're like, oh my gosh, I wish I knew then what I know now, you know? And so, but, you know, we've talked about it several times, and it just kind of part of the story, and that's kind of how it's gone. Yeah. So, so we're still doing that, you know. At Christmas time, we got together, like, we went and had, you know, breakfast. With everybody, like, you know, with the kids and Mom. And so, you know, they like to give my kids presents. You know, Mom is very resourceful at finding, you know, like things. And so she'll be like, I have something for your kids. And so, you know, I'm like, I get a whole bunch of cookies, you know, like a big tub of cookies. And it's like, here you go. And so, so we're still there. So I do think that she does know that I can call,
Yeah, she's got somebody in her corner.
Right. Yeah. She invited me to go to her graduation. When she got her GED, she had like a graduation. So she invited me to go. Yeah. So, it's great to see that. And it's not perfect, but what is,
No, it's not at all. So in this whole thread, you've kind of talked about it a little bit about, how faith was a part of kind of a thread through the whole story. How have your relationship with the Lord changed from those beginning days till now? Mm-hmm. How have you kind of seen maybe your role as a follower, a disciple? Like, what has changed in your faith journey because of foster care?
Well, I'm very grateful that we had the Lord to go through all of this. It's hard enough to try to go through anything really, in life. If you go at it alone, then just saying, okay, this is hard, but, Lord help us. Yeah. But I think that one of the things that my husband and I kind of came out with was this concept of like, oh, we're so blessed, like the blessings. And because I think I'm trying to say this and hopefully it doesn't come out the wrong way, but like you might say, oh, like we have a car, like we're so blessed we have a car. Right. And trust me, I can understand that. Yeah. I grew up not having a car. Like my mom couldn't afford a car. We relied on public transportation. Yeah. So I do see having a car as a big blessing. But there's just, I guess when you're like in foster care and you see, like maybe you see like their condition, your condition, you might be like, oh, like I'm so blessed because I have this, And so we kind of were like, but what is a blessing really? Is it really the material things? Is it really that you have this house? Is it really that you have a car? It just seemed like that was really not the blessing. You really can't like connect and be in somebody else's circle if you're thinking, well, I'm so blessed because I have a bigger house than you do. Right. I don't think that works well. And so we started seeing how a blessing was more about, like when we had this little boy and he was so aggressive towards me and he was trying to punch me and I would have to like cover myself and he would just like, ah. And 2 hours later, he was like, can you read me a book and get me in, get him in bed. And I would, lay down and, with him and read him a book and, this and that. And I was able to pray over him. And to be able to just have that prayer, and say, may the Lord bless you and your family and your children and, just your children's children. And so that became more of what a blessing is, to be able to do. I was able to pray that just like I, have done for my children when he was in our home. I was like, I got you. I can pray over you, and, just so that, is a blessing. Yeah. The fact that my oldest, there was a time when he struggled with like, why are you doing this? Why did you adopt? He was not like doing well with getting along with his sisters, and so we were going through all of this, and then we bring this other foster kid, and he's like, what are you doing? Yeah. And there was a time when things were just not pretty, if I'm being really honest, he would just not want to have anything to do with them. But now, like they're like in a thread that they talk,
they talk about you.
They talk about me. I'm not even on that chat. And it's like he is, connected to his sisters now. And just to see that transformation in, like, only God could have done that.
Right. You can't parent that.
You can't. I mean, you tried and then you're like, nope, I did not do that.
It blows up in your face.
And so, exactly. And so that is what I see more as a blessing. Yeah. And so I think
it's all the blessings, exactly what you're saying. Tell me if I'm wrong, but it's more that I've seen this too. The blessings are related or are rooted in that relationship. Like you see the blessings in the relationships, the messy relationship with his mom, the messy relationship between your son and your daughters. Like that's of watching that journey of like them wrestle out what the world is telling them they should be doing, what the world is telling them they should, comfort, ease. And then you brought heart into your home, and they had to wrestle with, okay, I have to have grace, and I have to have mercy, and I have to be forgiving, and I have to be generous with my mom and generous with my house. And yeah, that's the real blessing, is watching your kids really go opposite of the world, what the world tells them, and lay down some things and surrender some things, and love people where they're at.
Yeah. And it's not that you're not grateful, I want my kids, I'm teaching my kids to be grateful and this and that, but I think it goes beyond just these like material things that are going to pass.
They're all going to pass.
So I think that was probably something that we felt maybe that we understood better. It just, we needed to really understand what it means when I'm like, oh, I'm blessed, It goes beyond.
Absolutely.
Yeah, all the material things. So.
Well, Brenda, thank you so much. This has been so great. So exciting. Thank you for sharing your story with us, and letting us kind of journey with you through your story. And so if you've enjoyed the podcast today, please share it, like it, follow us. You're going to get to hear more and more stories of just people, normal, everyday, average people who said yes to where God was leading them and got to go on a crazy journey with Him. And we just get to hear these and learn from them and be inspired by them. So have a great day. Thanks.